And now we have Susan Stone, Credit Union SHA of Economics at Adelaide University, joining us from Adelaide. Susan, the Trump administration says these tariffs are about tackling forced labor and protecting U.S. industries. Now, this reason has been raising what I call skeptical eyebrows, hasn't it? Is this really a shift in trade policy or just another label for protectionism?
Well, to be fair, forced labor has been on the U.S. trade agenda for quite some time. They've been talking about trying to tackle this issue both within the WTO, but also through other means. But having said that, the ILO has a protocol as well as a waiting for ratification of different unilateral or multilateral levels of forced labor protection that the U.S. has not ratified. So they have not gone through that channel, which is available to them if they really were interested in moving forward this agenda on a global level. So that's probably where some of the skepticism is coming from. There are other ways or other means through which this issue can be addressed, and doing it through tariffs seems quite convenient with other parts of the Trump agenda.
Now, for Asian economies, and many of those rely heavily on exports, we're talking about China, India, Southeast Asia. This round, who tends to lose the most, and are there any countries that could actually benefit as supply chains adjust?
Well, Southeast Asia has already shown signs of benefiting from the tariffs or the shifting supply chains that are in relation or in reaction to some of this new protectionist measures in the United States. As a matter of fact, Australia has even seen its exports to the United States increase as a result of some of the tariffs that have been put in place. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that there are many exemptions along the way, and that is included for these most recent forced labor tariffs. There are over 2,100 tariff lines that are exempted under these measures. They include things that are important to Singapore, like pharmaceuticals, minerals, oils, different, machinery and equipment, and civil aviation parts and equipment. So where you sit in the value chain and what it is you're actually trading will have a big impact on how much these tariffs really do influence your current trade strategies.
Right. Now, many Asian governments have spent the past few years diversifying supply chains in response to various rounds of the tariffs, right? And of course, reducing dependence on China. Do these tariffs accelerate the trend of diversifying, or they simply create yet another layer of uncertainty for businesses? I mean, to your point, Australia has, actually increased its trade, but this time round there is another 12.5% with this new round, isn't there?
That's true. I mean, it is, well, it's not always an additional 12.5%. We had, of course, the famous Liberation Day tariffs, which were ultimately struck down by the U.S. Supreme Court. And then the administration put in place another round of tariffs that were always seen to be temporary. They were only allowed to last for 6 months. And as those tariffs were coming due, that is why they kind of really rushed through this current round of forced labor tariffs. And so some countries, which went from 10%, maybe have gone to 12.5%. Many other countries like Indonesia, Cambodia have actually gone below. They were higher before, but now they're only at 10%. Many of their goods in textiles and other areas have actually been exempted or subject to what we call tariff rate quotas. So they're allowed to export a certain amount tariff-free, and anything over that is subject to a tariff. So the regime is constantly changing. So as you point out, this does continue to create a level of uncertainty. It continues to cause businesses to constantly have to reevaluate their contracts and where they're sourcing their material. And, at the end of the day, they're just facing a continuation of a desire by the administration to impose some level of tariffs on a broad range of goods coming into the United States.
Now, Susan, let's talk about reactions by Asian governments to this latest round. I mean, Japan and South Korea are now seeking clarification and assurances. But what about other governments? Do you expect them to retaliate, to negotiate, or just simply absorb the impact this round? And what options do they realistically have if they still want to trade or to access U.S. markets?
Well, I think many of the countries won't retaliate. We saw many Southeast Asian countries, as I said, the ones Indonesia, Cambodia, Malaysia, they negotiated agreements in response to the original Liberation Day tariffs. And these trade agreements that they have, well, they're called, they have these, they're called ARTs. They have agreements on, restrictives or different types of trade that they've put in place. And actually, those were cited by the administration as to why some countries were receiving the 10% tariff. So there was a bit of an incentive to negotiate further concessions with the United States in response to the tariffs. But, as you pointed out, we were at 10%. Now some are still at 10, some are at 12.5. These aren't large differences. So it remains to be seen if it's really worth it for countries to provide additional concessions to the U.S. in response to, what could be 2.5% increase in tariffs. And finally, we do know that the majority of these tariffs are paid by domestic consumers. So any country that retaliates against the U.S. is, putting tariffs on U.S. exports to their countries are really harming their own domestic businesses and their own domestic consumers. So many countries realize this, and that's why we haven't seen large reactions of retaliations in response to any of the tariffs that the Trump administration has implemented.
All right, Susan, thanks very much for that analysis. Susan Stone, Credit Union SA, Chair of Economics at Adelaide University. Thank you.